Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment for the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. Now, for those of you that have followed my coverage of this phone, you already know I am very fond of it, and for good reason. Although it is very expensive, it is arguably the best phone ever made, at least candy bar style phone. And the sad news, which is part of this full review, months later from launch, is that it may be the end of the Note line. Now, most news is pointing towards that it's not the death of the Note, but at least going into 2021, Samsung is going to invest the majority of its R&D dollars into foldables like, of course, my Fold 2 over here. And that's understandable because if you followed my coverage or anyone else that is at least somewhat competent when it comes to covering tech, then you know that Samsung has been pretty adamant about making folding devices the new hotness and really the focus of the top tier. Whereas in years past, the Note always occupied that space. It was the most powerful and now most expensive device that Samsung sold other than folding devices. And now that Samsung has not only one, but two, and is even in a second generation of folding devices with a third gen on the way, it's not really that the Note has become antiquated, but again, that Samsung sees their primary investment being in foldables because that is where they see the future. And I can't disagree. So when I say this may be the death of the Note, it's more like the Note, the majority of the Note features that we've come to love over the years are going to find their way into the traditional lineup. So your S21, that's going to likely have a pen. And that means that you won't need a Note anymore. So if that is the truth, I mean, this is a lot of what has been leaked for since August now. If that is where things are headed, it's sad, but also understandable again, because foldables have really taken over. I mean, whether we're talking about the Flip or the Z Fold 2, these are both very good examples of Samsung and some of their finest work, in my opinion, coming together and delivering devices that are unlike anything else we've used before, and that are actually practical and not just gimmicks. Whereas when you look at the Note itself, I don't know how much more this product can mature. The screen got larger, 6.9 inches. We've got a high refresh rate now, 120 hertz. The brightness is, pretty much best in class. In fact, I would say this is one of the best displays you're going to see on a phone. It's not perfect, this device. Very large battery, 4,500 milliamp hours. Could it have been larger? Could it have been 5,000? Sure, but they would have had to give up some of the profile. This is in a Pitaka case, for those of you that are wondering. Pen latency, one of the biggest improvements besides the camera module. I mean, the pen performance now in this generation is arguably the best that Samsung, I have to go back to my right hand, I'm not a lefty, has ever put together. I mean, it really is in another class, even if my handwriting is not. So the question becomes, how much better can a device like this get? And if Samsung has mastered pen input, which I really feel like they have, the latency, the texture, the experience, granted the stylus is still, it doesn't remind you of a pen or pencil in any way because it's too small, but that's because it pockets into the phone, then why not add it to their full phone lineup? And I have to say, over the years, the curved edge, I liked it, but the fact of the matter is, from a practicality standpoint, too many false positives on touches when holding the device. And that's part of the reason that if you caught my comparison of this to the Xperia 1 Mark II, in many ways I preferred the 1 Mark II. I've also never been a fan of the notch or the pinhole cutout. That's something that hopefully we'll see eventually fade away. But for now, the best they could do here in the Note 20 Ultra was just make it smaller than what we had seen in previous gen phones from Samsung. And they did a good job. The good news here is that the front-facing camera is very good, and so are the 3 rear cameras. So we have larger sensors, at least one of them, than what you would usually find. We have the ability to record 8K video, which I don't think anybody needs, but no one will be upset about having. We have, one of the better autofocus systems on any smartphone out there. Very wide field of view, the ability to have a real telephoto zoom, which is really nice. But this, for me, would not replace a traditional camera. In fact, no phone on the market will replace a traditional camera. I will always be apt to, if I know I will be shooting any sort of images, I will have a camera with me. Now, when I don't have one, that's when having a module like this is great. And I give them being Samsung, a lot of credit for really moving the needle with camera performance from years past, because Samsung was never terrible, at least in their age of modern dominance with smartphones, but they were never the best. And I really feel like this does put them right there. I've mentioned that throughout my coverage of this phone. You know, I could get into the processor and the RAM. I mean, come on, Qualcomm just announced the other day their 888 5G chipset, and that's not worth really getting into. The processor in here is beyond competent. The 5G, unfortunately, I was never able to utilize because, at least in my part of the US, there is no 5G coverage yet. And the fact being that we're in a pandemic and I'm not traveling, 5G is neither here nor there. It's nice to have the future proofing, but I do feel, can't help but feel, it was forced on us. And I say that because last year, even this year, phones like, you know, my Z Flip came out with no 5G in order to make it more affordable, and then they introduced a 5G version. And by the way, the Z Flip is still one of my favorites. I do kind of miss using it on a day-to-day basis, but for those of you who are looking for the traditional all-in-one, best camera, I won't say best battery life, because in order to get the best performance on battery life, you will have to disable the 120 hertz display, and I haven't been at full brightness. Let's go ahead and blast our eyeballs now so you can really see how blown out things get when we're at full brightness. I mean, this is a content consumption monster. It's a little computer, you know, it's got more RAM than the majority of devices out there. Does it blow away the Note 10 Plus? No, it doesn't. I mean, really the biggest improvement over the Note 10 Plus, in my opinion, of course, lies in the pen performance and the camera capability, which I feel like the camera's kind of a trade-off because not everybody wants a hump on the back of their phone. And quite frankly, since you already heard from me, a little bit of dust there, that I always will have a camera if I think I'll need one. I was perfectly happy with the Note 10 Plus. And while I welcome the improvements of the 20 Plus, or excuse me, 20 Ultra, you see what happened there? Too many pluses, ultras, extras, extremes, extra large, supersized. This is great to have, but I preferred having a flush camera system. So I actually prefer the design of the Note 10 Plus over this phone. I don't think this really needed to get any larger, but I think Samsung kind of said, what else can we do to make this a new Note? So you got the higher refresh rate, you got the new processor, same amount of RAM as the previous generation. They screwed us a little bit on storage, as you all know. You know, the fact that they took us down, I'm not happy with. Even if storage is expandable, that's not the right thing to do on this phone. I really believe that 256 should have remained the base configuration, and 512 and 1 terabyte should be available options. But that's just not the world we live in, especially with the pandemic. So, you know, there's that to deal with. Wi-Fi 6 performance on here is fantastic. This is a modern device in every way. I mean, it's a workhorse. If that's what you're looking for, you're going to get it. The IP68 rating, just like the Note 10 Plus before it, does exactly what it advertises. So you're going to get basically as good protection as possible when it comes to the elements. Remember, 3 meters, 30 minutes. It cannot last beyond that. And this is not designed to go in the ocean. So they're talking about fresh water, folks. If you put this in the ocean, whatever happens, happens. Good luck. There's a reason they make waterproof cases for devices like this. I, in fact, covered one from Ghost Tech. And again, the whole premise is to protect it from all of the elements. Dex is a wonderful desktop class operating skin, if you will, that they've integrated into their ecosystem. Once upon a time, Touchwiz. Now, of course, it's One UI. And I think Samsung has done an amazing job. You know, Touchwiz used to be really the culmination of the problems with Samsung devices. And now One UI, a quick rename and real maturation of all of their features have turned it into, I think, an overlay or an experience that is not only their trademark, but something that most manufacturers wish they had. The only other one being, of course, Apple, which is their own operating system, not their own user experience overlaid on top of an operating system. So a lot of credit goes to Samsung for sticking with it in spite of tremendous criticism over the years and really making one of the most polished devices you will ever see. Is it bulky? Yeah, it is. And it's not for everyone for that reason. I mean, not everyone is going to want such a large phone. Let me get it out of the Pitaka. And by the way, the Pitaka is my favorite case because of its form factor, because of its usefulness when it comes to attaching to the Pitaka magnetic docks for your car. In fact, Apple completely knocked them off. So with the whole Mag-Ease concept. So that tells you how good Pitaka really is because, well, if Apple copies you, you're doing something right. But cases aside, there are many options. The finish on the phone, I was more a fan of, again, the Note 10 Plus in terms of finish. This kind of has always felt like just an S20 Ultra branded as a Note 20, but with better lines because the S20 was just ugly compared to this. I'm a much bigger fan of the clean lines this has than what you'll find on, again, the S20. So the question really becomes, is this the right phone? Now, at discounted prices, and that's part of the reason I'm coming back so many months later, I think it's a steal. If you can pick this up for $1,000 or less, you're buying a great device. In the same vein, if you can get the Note 10 Plus, and I saw a lot of deals over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, where it was floating around, I think, if memory serves, something like, somewhere between $500 and $600, that is, buy the Note 10 Plus immediately. Of course, you will not get as many software updates as you will hear from the current gen device, but bear in mind that the fact that Note devices may be a thing of the past tells you a lot about the fact that things are going to be on the decline for traditional handsets from Samsung. I'm not saying they're going to start making pieces of junk, but the fact remains that where you're going to see the most innovation, where you're going to see the biggest improvement, it's going to be in devices like this, like the Fold or the Flip, or I don't know what they're going to call the other one that is going to have pen input. It might be the Roll. I don't know if they're just trying to build a portfolio of, euphemisms for fat. But, for lard, we've got the Fold, soon we're going to have the Roll, maybe stretch marks next. I don't know. But the whole point is that R&D is going into the right places, and that is innovation. And so while I have been a Note user pretty much from the beginning and now possibly till the end, I have no qualms about Samsung shifting their money into what I absolutely agree is the future, which are foldables or rollables, because there's no other way to really innovate. Just making devices larger and giving them higher refresh rates and better cameras, those are improvements, not innovations. And hopefully that comes across clearly. I do still think this is the best phone on the market. Again, if you're looking for a traditional phone and you're not intimidated by its size, I think Samsung made a mistake eliminating the smaller Note. And by that I mean they didn't mirror what they did with the Note 10 line. They did make a smaller Note, but it's still fairly large, if not too large for a lot of consumers. And you see, Apple actually caught on to what Samsung did, and evidence of it by making an iPhone mini. So clearly, I think Samsung kind of missed their own mark by not keeping the Note 10 or the Note 20 and Note 20 Plus, or Note 20 size is what I should say, because they, of course, made a Note 20. But they did not retain that form factor. That 6-inch display on the Note 10, I think, was brilliant. It wasn't for me. I didn't like that it didn't have expandable storage, but it was really a Note for everyone. And maybe that was the signaling of the death of the Note line, not this generation or the pandemic or the success of foldables like these. Although I do think the success of foldables is really the death of the Note identity, because it can no longer be Samsung's top of the line when you've got this phone that is already more expensive than it, and then this guy, which is more expensive than any mainstream device from any carrier. And or not carrier, manufacturer, I mean, of course. So it's a logical pathway. I get why Samsung, if they end up ending the Note line and integrating the S Pen into all of their phones, it makes sense. They've invested a ton of R&D into the S Pen experience. They're not going to abandon that. And most traditional buyers of the Galaxy series aren't going to be upset. They will not that they have a pen now slotted into their phone. The worst case scenario is they're going to say they don't use it, which, quite frankly, there are plenty of Note users I've met over the years that say they don't use it either. And then I kind of wonder why they bother buying a Note, because to me, the whole beauty of having the Note is the pen experience. Now, of course, what comes with it is always top-of-the-line specs, better performance and hardware than any other phone on the market. That includes Apple, because I don't believe in synthetic benchmarks that only exist inside of one operating system. That's just, if anything was ever bogus, it's that sort of benchmarking. And that's why when users come over to my channel and say Apple's newest chip outperforms everybody, that's a half-truth, isn't it? And if it's not, well, then you enjoy Kool-Aid. And since I don't use Apple products, it doesn't matter what kind of chip Apple produces, because it's not going to do what I need it to. I live in a world of a free market. At any rate, the point is that this device is still the king of the hill here at the end of 2020 and going into 2021. Now, how far away the new Galaxy lineup is, I don't know. Of course, it will have a better processor. Will it have more RAM? Probably not. I think 8 gigs is going to be a sweet spot for some time. That's what they put in this device. And surprisingly, the Z Fold 2 did not get more RAM than what you could find in the the Note 20 Ultra. So with that kept in mind, Samsung intentionally cut some corners on this, like the camera module. They gave us the camera from the S20 line rather than the Note 20 Ultra line. And they lowered the storage on here to 256 from first gen 512. Of course, no expandable storage on either of these. So a clear trend is happening here with Samsung, and that is that money is flowing, as I've said over and over again, to the newer technology. Now, if this is the last Note, it will have been the best ever made. That I can say through the course of this video. Again, from a pen perspective, best writing, best cameras. I don't love that it doesn't sit flush on any surfaces. Essentially, you have to compensate for that with cases. It is wrapped with Corning's latest version of Gorilla Glass, which is good. It is a very solid phone overall. A lot of users over the months have talked about a wobbling that comes from the cameras, from the camera unit. To my knowledge, that is the optical image stabilization, but I'm not exactly sure, nor would I begin to tell anyone what I think it is. That's what I've read. I've never experienced any problems with it. And overall, this phone it does exactly what you expect it to do, which is operate smoothly, quickly, and at the end of the day, there is nothing it can't do, except for maybe last the entire day. So that's really the only critique I think that you can give to this phone, other than it possibly being too large, depending on the user. The Note 20 Ultra really can do everything. From a pen input standpoint, cameras being top of the class. Some will argue, of course, that the iPhone outperforms it. I think that's really more of a matter of personal preference. But they've really come a long way. And One UI, as I keep saying, is now something that, Touchwiz was once, derelict, and now it's kind of, the measure to meet, the standard to compete with. So it says a lot about Samsung coming into their own. And the fact that this may be the end of the Note also says a lot about Samsung coming into their own, because, the first Note was introduced in 2012, and here we are in 2020, and they're on to bigger and better things. And God help us all, I'm not being literal, of course, if Samsung isn't able to come up with something better than just a large-scale phone with pen input 8 years later. Thankfully, they have. And again, they aren't just gimmicks. But my only real criticism, as I just stated, is battery life. Also, pricing, of course. I said this throughout all of my coverage. I think that they price this too aggressively. And by aggressively, I mean too expensive. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's not expensive. Come on, what are you talking about? And you're living in your own bubble. It is too expensive. You've got first world problems. That doesn't mean people are poor. It means people are rational. And, they're not losing money on these phones, folks. That's why when they go on sale over the holiday season, they take a really big dip. And that's why there are a lot of people that don't bother with launch. I get it. Another thing I want to point out is that I've mentioned this in my other videos, not a fan of the relocation of the S Pen. As a righty, at least when it comes to writing, the right side is intuitive. It's where it belongs. Now, of course, the reason they moved it, again, I didn't, contact them. I don't have any relationship with Samsung, believe it or not. Hopefully that'll change. Samsung, wake up. I get enough views and have enough subscribers interested in Samsung products. You're leaving your own money on the table. Forget about me. The camera module reversed. So on previous generations of the Note, the pen was always on the opposite side of the camera. And so the camera module, I think, getting larger here, I think that played a role in what ended up happening. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to be something to do with the camera module, possibly 5G. But again, it makes sense that it's the camera module that has moved the pen. Okay, that's what I'm figuring. It's what makes the most sense. Fingerprint Magnet, absolutely. You may not be able to tell in this video, or you may be able to tell very easily that it collects fingerprints like a museum, at least one where you get to touch things. And it's not a good thing, but you're going to probably, have this in a case or a skin at least. I highly recommend protecting this. And for those of you out there that need insurance, please get it. Even if you're not leaving your house. Very expensive phone. The omission of a headphone jack, started with the Note 10 line. The Note 9 was the last one to have it. Do I miss it? No, but I know many of you do. And so I will mention the fact that Samsung didn't need to do that, but they decided if the competition has done it and they've all gotten away with it, we don't need to be the last one delivering features that some will perceive as antiquated, especially when we can make a little more money. And that's exactly what happened here. The GPU on here, very competent. If you plan on doing any form of mobile gaming, this is going to be able to do everything and anything you desire. So while I may not be demoing all of these things, you've probably watched reviews about this phone to death already at this point. And most of what I do on my channel, if you're not already aware of it, is give as much insight as I can about the product, how it fares in the real world, not in the review world, and also how the market receives it, treats it, not just from a consumer standpoint, but from an economics standpoint, because I've been in the stock market for over 20 years. So I look at these things in a broader scope than a lot of other people do when they review them. They've made an incredibly clean and competent device, volume rocker, power button if you want it to be on the right, or just a button that you can assign to anything you want. I just wish they'd get rid of the pinhole. Battery life would be better. And if this hump could go away, it'd be great. Another thing I didn't talk about, wireless charging. We took a step backwards. We had 45-watt charging, even though there wasn't a 45-watt charger included out of the box with the Note 10 Plus. And then here, all of a sudden, we're looking at 25-watt max. And that again shows you, I don't know if that was a manufacturing challenge or just a corner being cut because of the pandemic in order to make more money. I mean, there are Chinese manufacturers making phones now with 100-watt chargers. I already have power banks capable of 100-watt delivery. So the question becomes, what is Samsung doing? I think they're playing a little bit of Apple's game here, and it makes sense. They finally have gotten to the top of the mountain, and they're able to look down and basically do whatever they want. And users who want their devices, much like the way Apple fans will purchase whatever the revision is, they're leveraging that a little bit. And hey, if it works and you can get away with it, you do it. It doesn't make it right. And so I don't like that they didn't give us 45-watt or faster charging with this, just as I don't like that somehow our base internal storage configuration went down. I mean, that's just, so many devices now require smartphone storage. Forget apps alone. I mean, if you game, I don't do too much mobile gaming because I have laptops and real computers for it, but I know many of you out there do. And part of the pitch of this phone was to use a console controller with it and game on it. Now, a lot of that was through the cloud, but let's say you weren't doing it through the cloud. It's just counterintuitive to say, well, you have expandable storage. Yeah, the expandable storage cannot really be used. Most apps will not permit it. On top of that, you wouldn't want to, because micro SD cards are simply not fast enough to leverage what needs to be in order to utilize apps. Forget about gaming. So it's a head scratcher. Just as, the pinhole is a head scratcher, I would rather have a little bit of bezel, believe it or not. Call me crazy. Just don't call me Shirley. If you get that, good luck. But having that pinhole bothers me. It's bothered me since the trend began, and it bothers me on my Z Fold. It bothers me on my Z Flip. But those phones have something this doesn't, which is the ability to be transformative. That is why they are the future. What they don't have is IP68 ratings for dust and water resistance and pen input, which this does have. So at the end of the day, to reiterate, 26 minutes in, just about on the mark right now. Best phone on the market, also one of the most expensive in the candy bar realm. You will not be upset purchasing this as long as you understand its size. Its form factor is unruly. It is more likely to fall out of your pocket, at least my pockets, than any other device I've had. I have had the Z Fold 2 fall out on me once. That was more to do with the lining of those crappy J. Crew pockets than the phone itself, and also the fact that I had no case on the Z Flip. The leather half-sided cases are trash. This phone you can fully rig out, and you want to wear it on a belt clip. I showed a Ghost Tech case. You can do that. And it is built like a brick house. This is the go everywhere, do everything device. There is no other phone like it. The closest to it, of course, is the S20 Ultra, which I would not recommend to anyone. Not just because it's ugly, but the autofocus capability. There's a reason that Samsung changed the camera module. There's a reason they went to 5 times optical zoom from 10 times. There's a reason the digital zoom became 50 rather than the space zoom 100, which was a ridiculous thing designed really to, I think, captivate Apple users, because Samsung usually doesn't do silly crap like that unless they're trying to get users who like silly crap. And this is not me insulting Apple users, it's insulting Apple, because Apple does a tremendous amount of silly shit and profits from it. Most manufacturers can't get away with that. Apple's had carte blanche for many years, but for the last, I would say 3 to 4 years, they've been playing copycat. Even with this mini crap coming back, that was them seeing Samsung make smaller phones and actually sell them. And then say, wait a minute, maybe we've got to return to our roots. Maybe it is time to bring back something smaller. And so they've done that. But overall, this is a great device. Through the course of this video, it's gone down 1 percentage point on battery from 75 to 74. If you live in a 5G market, you'll have gigabit speeds, which is even more bonkers. But overall, the only way you're going to do better than this is waiting for the next generation. And if there is no next Note, you might not be so happy. Because, as I've reiterated, the money is going to foldables. And that's, for good reason. Foldables absolutely are the future. I mean, this is what it's all about. Devices like the Z Fold 2 right here. Devices like the Z Flip that I have right here. This is where it's at. This is where things are headed. And as long as devices like this are out there, you better believe that the Note is going to have a harder time coexisting, because you've got competing devices that are more technologically advanced, more alluring. The wow factor certainly exists more in devices that fold. I mean, the fact that I can fold this up and put it in a pocket and still have such a large format device, I wish this could do this. It can't. But I also wish this had, water resistance, dust resistance, and pen input, and it can't do that. Same applies to the magical Z Fold 2 over here. An amazing phone, $2,000, certainly not for everyone. Basically 2 devices in one, really. The Z Flip is not. That's one of the reasons I love this, is because I have a tablet and a phone in one. It is heavier and bulkier than the Note, but because it's narrower, easier to handhold in phone mode, as I'll call it, and because I've got a kickstand, it really does turn into a tablet. Here, yeah, there are a million cases with kickstands. It still won't be a tablet. It'll be what we would have considered a tablet back in the day. I'm talking about 6-7 years ago. But that says a lot. I mean, we have come a really long way to have such a powerful phone. Cameras that have essentially rendered point-and-shoot cameras dead. There's a reason that Sony's RX line is really all that's left these days. And then DeX, as I've mentioned, the ability to have that and use it wirelessly and basically give you the same feeling and experience that you'd get out of Chrome operating system, Chrome OS, or Windows, or even something from Apple. It's pretty amazing that Samsung has done this all on their own just to make this phone the best on the market. And they've done it. And by the way, call quality, stellar, Bluetooth, everything on this phone just does exactly what it should. The speaker performance, speakerphone, very good. This is incredibly loud. I mean, they already had made the Note 10 loud, so I was wondering how they were going to boost this even more, and they did it. This Note 20 Plus is one of the loudest devices I've ever held in my hand. Of course, my Z Fold 2 is louder, but it's got a lot more room. It's got the ability, it's got floor space, surface area that just doesn't exist on this guy. So, at the end of the day, if you're asking me to select between this phone, the Z Fold 2, and the Z Flip, it really comes down to what I've been mentioning through the whole video. If you're after the phone that can go anywhere, do anything, it's this guy. It is the Note 20 Ultra. It really is the jack of all trades and master of all. Not master of none, master of all. But if you are looking for something that's going to change the way that you fundamentally use your device, that's where these two come in. Ladies, putting this in your pocketbook, even though you may not be going anywhere, it's the future of phones for you. And men, with your Merces. I'm not one of them, but if you like to carry a Merce, I respect that, and everyone else should too. Shut up if you don't, quite frankly. But for me, it's all about that Z Fold 2. I mean, this is where it's at. And if they come out, as I said, with the flubber, the fold blubber, what's essentially going to be a rollout with two pocketed, like barn doors, designed glass so that you can use pen input, and it's going to be the roll. They do have to be aware, I don't think it's an ESL thing, that all of these names, again, if they're going to call that the roll and this is the fold, they're starting to sound like they're making fat jokes, and they got to be aware of that. And it might be an ESL thing. Could very well be. So someone over at Samsung, please wake up and realize that if you call the next phone in the foldable arena the roll, I'm going to continue to make fun of you, because folds and rolls, what else does that sound like, as I mentioned, other than a jab at fatties? At any rate, the Note 20 Ultra is the best phone of its kind. If you want a candy bar, large form factor, do everything device that is water resistant, built like a brick house, still incredibly thin, and 5G capable, you've got it. You don't have to look anywhere else. Just make sure you get it on sale. Do yourself a favor. And if you can wait a little bit longer, guess what? These phones are only going to go down more. I mean, they were going down in price almost, as soon as the trade-in programs were over. This, not so much. This one's come down in price, but that's because a 5G model came out. But not that much. I mean, it started out at $1,380, went down, I think it's now $1,250. So bear all of that in mind. But there's no question, this is the candy bar to beat. But it might be too big for you. It might be too unruly. You may not care about the cameras. You may not care about the 120 hertz screen. God knows the 120 hertz bothers me because it eats that battery for breakfast. Still doesn't make it unusable, and with quick charging, granted you're capped at 25 watt, you'll still get back to half charge pretty quickly. Now, had they done 45 or 100, then the battery capacity discussion and overall battery performance would be moot. But it's not the world we're living in, folks. Anyway, Pandemic special, Note 20 Ultra is the best candy bar style phone of the pandemic. Surprise, surprise, or no surprise. Hopefully it's not the death of this device. I really hope not. But that's the end of at least my story with the Note 20 Ultra. Best Note ever made. Hopefully not the last, but it looks like we're all just going to have to live with S Pens being in every other phone that Samsung makes, and foldables, whether they're to make fun of fat people or not, being the new standard. Hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.